huge stuff. What's the Crimson Combine going to look like? We'll discuss that coming up next year on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, it's been a little bit since we heard about the Crimson Combine in lieu of a Oklahoma spring game. What's your thoughts on it now versus when we first heard about it?
So earlier this week, last week, they kind of announced more details for the Crimson Combine. And so we're starting to see here, let's see, it'll start at 1 o'clock, position groups of O-line, D-line, linebackers, defensive backs, quarterback, running back, wide receivers. Tight ends will compete in some drills like specifically designed for each group. So you may see some one-on-ones, may see some players, might see a little tackling in here or whatnot. But it sounds like they may actually have a practice early that morning as well to warm up for the Combine. So they'll have an hour of a bunch of drills and stuff. And then after that, they'll do some stuff, a quote-unquote party on the Palace there at Owen Field, where players are going to do autographs, and they're going to have all kinds of stuff like inflatables, Jordan Brand shoebox retail shop, and a beer garden that's going to offer activities for fans of all ages. So you're going to have the Schooner, Big Red Rocket, all kinds of stuff. Trophies are going to be on display for pictures. So fans will get a watered-down version of your typical red-white game or whatnot. It's just not going to be like keeping score or televised, which I get with some fans. This is usually the best opportunity to make a game because pricing has really gotten it to where it basically priced out a lot of fans nowadays just because of the popularity of the sport. People are willing to pay more to try to get themselves there. So yeah, this was usually the best opportunity for fans that wanted to go to the game and hadn't been able to do it or afford it, or you can make time for it. Maybe a busy fall. This was usually their best opportunity. Well, they can come out, hang out, and see some cool, hopefully some cool drills. I'm hoping they do a lot of one-on-one stuff. Like, make it feel like it's a quote-unquote game without it being set up like a game. I think that will make it worthwhile.
I think if they really wanted to do something that would be kind of fun for the fans, having even just some 7-on-7 or just some team red zone work where it's football and it's competitive, even if it's not like a full-on game. But I get where they're coming from. They're trying not to get anybody injured. They're trying not to expose anybody to some tampering in the transfer portal. But at this point, like, if anybody is of interest to another team, they're probably already reaching out and they're probably already trying to get that pre-transfer portal tampering done. Oklahoma's probably doing something similar out there. They're trying to work the network, ask their players to reach out to their buddies and see, hey, you want to play some tight end for Oklahoma? Or, hey, we're looking for an interior offensive lineman. Oh, hey, we need a depth linebacker. You got any interest? And so, tampering's probably already happening through the agent, the NIL agents out there. So I get what Oklahoma's trying to do. There's a lot of concern with coaches across the country about overexposure, as well as, putting their players through too many snaps in a given year. And I get that. I'm not going to hate on it too much. I still think this is just kind of a meh event. It doesn't excite me. It doesn't get me going. The kids will probably love it and it'll be great for them. And this is me talking both as a fan and as somebody who does media about the Oklahoma Sooners. It's just kind of okay. Like I'm not one way or the other about this. It doesn't get me excited. It doesn't get me pumped, but I'm not also going to dog on it either. So it's a thing and it'll be fine. I still think that the future would be a scrimmage. Like that would be the best way forward, is a scrimmage or a spring practice, joint practice situation with another team that you could, you have a couple days of practice with another team and then you have a scrimmage with them. And then you can sell tickets to that and create a bigger event out of that. But we'll see if anybody decides to go that route. I know the NCAA is acting like they've got some sort of authority and power by squashing Colorado and Syracuse's desire to do that. But like Mike Gundy said, and this is the one thing I'll agree with Mike Gundy on in this whole thing is, what's the NCAA going to do? Why does anybody care what they think?
I mean, Paul Feinbaum said the same thing, and they're both right in this circumstance. I also understand why the NCAA said no in this one, just because of the time. I bet you if they would have proposed this in December, they would have let them, mainly because if they allow them to do it, then they got to let other teams do it. And other teams have already passed when it comes to like their spring game. They've already had their spring practices on that, and that the planning is gone. So, yeah, because that's already quote unquote complete for a lot of people, it just gives them like a little bit of a quote unquote unfair advantage. And then of course somebody's going to complain. That's really what it is that another team's going to complain about that. And that's an issue. I would have liked for the NCAA, though, to still let them go ahead and do it, because then it opens up the door for all of next season where everybody's going to get that done. I mean, heck, right now, you want to have an unfair, recruiting advantage? Deion Sanders being a head coach somewhere and still having the cachet in the pool that he does. That's your unfair advantage, which is not a bad thing. You can't knock them for that at all. Same thing with Bill Belichick. His name, does enough of it for those that actually pay attention to the coaching side of it. Now, Tom Brady goes out and be a head coach somewhere, then it's cheating. You need to go ahead and just squash that immediately. Can't have that happen unless he becomes a staff member at Oklahoma. But that's not the point. My point is that they could have easily just kind of, just let it happen, and then, like I said, make this a big deal for next year. And I bet you a lot of teams will probably consider it for next season, because it's a great idea, and, you can limit it to where it's not as, it's not going to affect your team as much. I think the only problem I have with it is that the minute someone gets hurt, then everybody's going to say, this was a dumb idea.
Yeah.
But it's football, guys. It's football. Right. You're going to get hurt occasionally.
Well, people are going to say that if it happens in a spring practice. Well, what are they doing out there? It's just spring. Who cares? Okay, you're watching the Crimson Combine. Get ready for a lot of one-on-one drills. To me, that's about the only thing that they'll do competitively, if they do any of that. When you're watching those drills and you're out there, understand cornerbacks are going to lose. Those one-on-ones are designed to be in favor of the wide receivers. On the flip side, one-on-ones between the offensive line and defensive line, designed for the defensive line. Those drills are going to weigh a little bit more heavily for the defensive line versus the offensive line. It's just the way they are. Don't overreact. It's for fun. It's going to be fine. Don't overreact. That's all I have to say about that. Hopefully you can get your kids out there, go get some autographs, get that John Mateer autograph before he goes and wins the Heisman and is the next, number one overall pick for the Oklahoma Sooners, and is off to superstardom. I didn't mean I meant to ask you this when we were talking John Mateer. Okay, if Barry Sanders isn't the right comp for him, what's your comp for John Mateer? I've made mine over the last few months, I
mean, your highs and lows, to me, he reminds me more of a Jalen Hurts.
Yes,
that's the comp that I'm going to maintain. I've been saying that comp, since, when people were calling him Baker, just because of the attitude and the moxie that he presumes on the field and his willingness to run. Totally understood the Baker Mayfield comps in some mindsets. Baker Mayfield's considered the best quarterback to play in college football history for the most part, right? Especially in the last 25 years. He's been that dude since 2000. I give him more of a Hurts because I think that he will be a true heavy run quarterback. He can get you 1,000 yards rushing in the season while throwing it for 4,000, just because he is that dynamic enough and that willing of a runner, which is a lot more than what Baker was. So I could give him Hurts a lot, because Hurts was a very big improviser too. He did a lot of things on his own and just made things happen. That was what Jalen Hurts did. Well, I think Mateer can give you something similar to that. I think on the bottom scale, if we're just going to keep it in the Oklahoma quarterback realm, probably Spitzer Rattler. With a good line, Rattler was, serviceable. He did enough to win games. You probably wanted someone a little bit more dynamic to play with. But, yeah, that is That's what I can see.
Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts is the one. You could talk Baker mentality, Jalen Hurts ability. I mean, based on that USA Today sports article that we talked about last week, he's got every bit of the chip on his shoulder that Baker Mayfield played with. So it's going to be fun, man. I cannot wait to see this dude on the field against an actual team week 2 when they play Michigan. It's going to be so much fun to see what this team is made of. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show, subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen. For your second listen of the day, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams. You can also check out my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. And you can follow the show at Locked On Sooners on all of your favorite social media platforms. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer
Sooner. Maybe we can compare him to like Andrew Luck too. I think that's probably a good name to make him be. Pick every good, number 1 quarterback ever.
There you go. Yeah.